All right, so it's Crime Time Tuesday. I'm your dyslexic detective, an armchair detective, Patti Lee, and our first case is an interesting one, shall we say. So, I chose 19 crimes. It's the red wine, 19 crimes for this one. Why, you ask? Well, I'll tell you. This has to do with criminals and deep. Look at that. That's kind of a deep pour. I gotta be careful. And it's red for love because it seems to have a romance aspect. So here's what we know so far. Last Friday, there was a woman by the name of Vicky White who had worked diligently, and by all reports, she had been a very good employee, an unblemished record in Alabama at the at first I thought it was Florida because it's the Lauderdale County Detention Center, and she was an assistant director there, and she had worked there for 20 years. She is 56, and actually Friday was supposed to be her last day of work. She was all ready to retire. Pretty good life, right? She had a retirement package. She unfortunately was widowed, no children. She had sold her house, so she had some money, and she had been talking about she wanted to go live at the beach maybe. Alabama's kind of close to Florida. I don't know if she specified Florida, but some beach. And the money was, going to help her out and do whatever her next phase of her life was. So, Vicky White isn't the only White in this story. The other White is Casey Cole White, a 38-year-old convict. He happened to he was transferred to the center at which Ms. White worked because he had already been convicted of a number of horrific crimes and was already spending 75 years in jail. But there were 2 counts of the Big M. He unalived somebody allegedly and was going to be prosecuted for that. So he had been brought to this other detention center in February. So February, March, April, we're at the very beginning of May. So a full 2 months, maybe towards a third. Apparently that was all the time it took for Mr. White to make what now came out as a special relationship with Vicky White. So that just came on the wires today, this afternoon. I saw it through CNN. They just said there was a special relationship. They're not like anything physical, apparently, and because nobody was even aware of it. But apparently she had been giving Mr. White, what did they say? That she gave him some special privileges. And I don't know what those special privileges are, but there's something. And so last Friday, what happened was there's a procedure that you have to have 2 deputies when you take an inmate anywhere. And 2 vanfuls of different groups of inmates had already been taken to the courthouse. At 9:20, all of a sudden, the assistant director, Vicky White, said, "Hey, I'm going to be taking Casey White to the courthouse. He needs a mental evaluation. Get him ready." And they're like, "Whoa, don't." She's like, "Oh, I'm gonna do it." Like, she didn't usually transport, but I'm the only certified. I'm the only arms, and you had to be arms certified deputy here. I mean, because everybody else had just left, so no worries, right? And after I drop him off, she told everybody, "I'm gonna go to that med center check. I'm not feeling very well." So last day at work, who knows? Maybe she's going out for an early lunch. Maybe she really is sick. Who knows what. But anyways, they're like, okay, cool. So it's like an urgent care center they call it urgent care, and some people call them docs in a box, but like just stopping by, she wasn't feeling so great. So he was prepared for transport. He was shackled, handcuffed, put in a vehicle. About 9:40 they left. So what everybody else then knew was that, they assumed he got to the courthouse. One thing I wonder, do they do mental evaluations? They must, I guess, right? Because otherwise that'd be a very poor excuse. But seems to me, usually I thought criminal psychologists and psychologists who do work in jails go to the jail to evaluate the prisoners, or wouldn't they take them to, I don't know, it just seemed weird that the courthouse for a mental evaluation, I don't know if that's where they go. That sounded weird to me. But regardless, nobody thought anything of it. So what we know, so the people there at the detention center figure she's doing that. And she said, she was dropping him off at the courthouse and he would come back with the other groups, the deputies. She was only doing this because he needed to go, I guess, at a different time. I don't know. That was the excuse, right? Now, it's been reported that around 11:30, somebody reported seeing her car, like the deputy's car from the jail, at a lot, like where other cars were for sale. And then that person didn't report it then. It was reported afterwards when they realized there was a problem. So by 3:30, they go, I can't get a hold of Vicky. They're trying to get a hold of her because what happened at the doctor's, even though it was her last day, they were concerned. And also by that time, Mr. White, Casey White, the prisoner, he did not return with the other prisoners. So they're at first everybody thought, okay, apparently he had tried to escape when he was in his other facility in 2020. He tried to escape then, and he made a shiv, which a shiv is when you make a knife out of something. And he did take a hostage to try to get out. He did not escape in 2020. So everybody was like, did he say something? Did he do something? Did he somehow threaten her to take her hostage? Now, just that apparently, and it was the inmates who kind of, dropped a dime on the other guy and said, look, she's been giving him special treatment. But at first, nobody knew that. So everybody was concerned. Right now, the important thing to know is, okay, so they're known to have an AK-15, because she was armed, and they think they also have, and then a shotgun as well. So those must have been somehow her issue. They know that they do have those two weapons. So they are armed and dangerous. Casey White is a white male who is 6'9" tall. So, Duty Ron was discussing this today. You can change a lot of things about yourself. You cannot change being super, super, super tall. So that's one thing. And they did see on surveillance that the car, 8 minutes after leaving the detention center, they saw the car, and then somebody else reported that they saw the car at the mall. They went and found the car then at the mall that evening. So, and they searched it. They didn't find anything there. So now, since the weekend, we know, okay, she, had all this money from selling her house. She apparently, in 2 months, this guy charmed her, or I don't know, maybe she charmed him, but they seem to be together in some respect. Although maybe he charmed her and then took her hostage. Do you know what I mean? We don't really know the whole story. She could have just been nice to him and then got in too deep, and then he really did. Maybe he just said, I want to go for a hamburger. Maybe she did something stupid. It was, it's your last day. Can't we just go out and do something? I just want to go to the mall. God knows what. It was really stupid, whatever it was, but I don't know if she meant to go on the run, but I don't know. She got that big chunk of money from her house. Oh, and her mom is shocked and said, she was living with her mom for the last 5 weeks since she sold her house, and her mom said, I never, she didn't really talk about retirement. You didn't know she was retiring? So, I mean, 56, not everybody retires, right? People retire at 65. I mean, she worked long enough, but so was she keeping this from her mom so that her mom wasn't suspecting anything else? We don't know. But we do know that they seem to have been, I guess, so Sheriff Rick Singleton in Alabama there is the one that's giving all this news. And now he said that, where did I write that down? They saw them recently. Oh my goodness. Sorry about that. All right. So they were last seen in a 2007 Ford Eagle. It's a copper gold. So there was a picture of it on al.com, Alabama, I guess it stands for .com. It has a picture if you'd like to look it up. I haven't figured out how to put pictures in my show yet. But it's a very bright red car. So very bright red car, short woman, and a super, super tall man. The only picture we have of her seems to be from when she first started her job. She looks like 30 and she's 56. So I haven't seen a recent picture of her. Again, he's super, super tall. And they were seen... Sorry, I wrote this down all in my wonderful chicken scratch. It must have said where they were seen, but I can't find that. So, but they are looking for them in a 2007 copper gold colored Ford Eagle. I thought it looked reddish orange to me. Okay, so armed and dangerous. That's all I need to know about that. 19 crimes and counting, right? We have an update on the Lilly Peters case. Lilly Peters was a 10-year-old beautiful little girl from, now last week I kept saying she was from Minnesota. She was from Wisconsin. They described Chippewa Falls, where she lives, as being 100 miles east of the Twin Cities, which is St. Paul and Minneapolis in Minnesota. So, as we've discussed, I am the dyslexic detective, and with that dyslexic, I was making a connection, obviously, between Minnesota, Minneapolis, St. Paul, because I don't know why they said that. Her small town of Chippewa Falls is actually just north of Eau Claire in Wisconsin. So I don't know if you know where Eau Claire is, but that's where it is. We are pairing Lily's update with some cupcake, and it's the Moscato Asti, because she is a little girl who probably liked cupcakes, and she was a sweet child, and it's unbelievably sad that we even have to have a drink to talk about this. All right, so the update, you might as well pour or take whatever helps you deal with things, because this is bad. Ooh, but that is good. I happen to have a very unsophisticated palate. This is very sweet. And this story is so sad. I'm just going to pour a little bit more because. All right. So, the update on Lilly Peters. So, she was the little girl who was at her aunt's house 2 Sundays ago. Well, a week ago Sunday. She left to go home. It was a very short, if she would have walked the street way, it was very short, but it was along like a main drag. So instead she was walking home through like a little, walkway where lots of people walked, and it was still sort of light. Okay, so here's the issue. Last week I said I have to do a corrections corner. Not only was it not in Minnesota, but I said we don't ever walk alone, right? That's what we could take away from this, was never go into the woods alone. Okay, so Lilly wasn't alone. Here's the update. they found who did it because the person, another child, they won't say the child's related, but the child lived at her aunt's house where she came from. Again, the world is a really unkind place. And this, well, we raise a glass to Lily that's sweet like her. Let me just tell you, this is one sick outcome. It's horrible for everybody involved. Horrible for the whole entire family. So it is the suspect is a 14-year-old who lived in her aunt's house. The police won't say it's her cousin. They will only refer to the child by the initials C and P-B. So Lily Peters and this C P-B. I don't know. And he lives at her aunt's house. You can do the math on that one. The whole situation is horrific. Apparently, when they went to the aunt's house, because that's where she came from, to interview everybody there, I mean, he's 14. He spilled his guts at first and sort of said exactly what happened. He was, I guess, now they didn't say he was supposed to walk her home, but he said the whole time he knew in his head, like he had planned to do this, so it was premeditated, and he wanted to do this, and, okay, she's 10, a baby, just into double digits, just basically was probably supposed to be the older cousin walking her home. Instead, you won't, it's so horrific. Knocked her off her bike, hit her in the head, strangled her, killed her. Big M'd her. And then essayed her. Dude obviously has problems. I don't know how that happens to create something at 14 that can do that to someone I mean, I don't know. If you've been watching my channel at all, hey, like and subscribe at this point. But you would have heard me say I have a doctoral degree, not a full degree because I didn't write my dissertation, on what were called ABD. So I took all my tests and passed them, got all my good grades in my classes. But I learn about typical development, not atypical development, and not criminal psychology. But the nature-nurture thing, we know development happens. There is some like hardwired stuff, but it works in conjunction with nature. But it just freaks me out that what happened to this 14-year-old male? How? And then I have not found substantiated corroboration on this, but somebody, this is again the grapevine, right? Somebody said that his father was not in the home. Now they said the 14-year-old lived with his mother and had since he was, he's lived his whole life with his mother in that house, and we know that's her aunt's house. So apparently somebody looked up the dad, and I don't know if he's still incarcerated or not, but there was some mention, and this is all allegedly, this is at the grapevine, so I don't know if this is accurate, but they said he essayed underage people. So I do not believe in the bad seed. I do not believe that is something that you're born with, but I am sure that person was around him for a certain amount of time, and I don't know what he saw on the computers in the house, or I don't know. It's disturbing. I need another drink. It's disturbing. I think just, right? Disgusting. Sorry. Being horrified isn't very informative. So, what can I tell you besides fact? So, he was in court on Wednesday. They will not show his face. Or his family. So they're trying not to identify him because obviously this is very horrific and it's a small town and people, I mean, it's just going to be a mess. The Chippewa County coroner, Ron Patton, he said that, they actually sent the autopsy out to a bigger county, Ramsey County. I'm assuming that might be in Eau Claire. But he reported that, as of now, the preliminary showed blunt force trauma and strangulation. Our third case is an murder, or if you're from South Cackalack, the Murdoch, although it's spelled like Murdoch case. Again, and it's, if you looked at it, you'd think it was Alex, but South Cackalack, it's Alec. So, Alec Murdoch. From the Low Country, y'all. So, we've paired case 3 with Menage a Trois. It's a red blend. Not really a fan of Menage a Trois or reds, but we'll give it a go. I chose Menage a Trois because Trois is 3, as you may know, and there's 3 big things that happened in the Murdoch case. So, quick review for those of you who are new. Alec Murdoch was a good old boy lawyer from a lawyer family. His family, in fact, had been the prosecutor, although they called them, I believe, the solicitor, for Hampton County in South Cackalack, which is South Carolina, for the past almost 100 years. Like, it was his great-granddaddy, then his granddaddy, then his daddy, then him. And his brothers are also lawyers. Like, and his son went to law school. Although, cheers to you, Buster. Maybe you broke the chain by getting out of it. Okay. Who knew that not getting through law school would be a positive thing at this point, right, Buster? So, why we're talking about him was he burst onto the news for all of us in true crime last June when his wife Maggie and his son Paul had been murdered, began at one of their many properties, Moselle, which was a hunting lodge. At the time, everybody's like, this very big family, you know, you think he's a prosecutor, must have been somebody he put away, and blah, blah, blah. But if you were from South Cackalack, you would have heard rumblings prior to the murders that their marriage wasn't going so well, that Maggie was living somewhere else, and everybody down there in the Low Country and pretty much all over South Carolina was aware that the boy, Paul, the younger son, had had a horrible time. There had been a boating accident. He seemed to be allegedly very inebriated, and apparently there was a fix to try to get him out of trouble, and there was a civil suit still going on because somebody had died. Why can't I'm sorry, her last name, let's just call her Ms. Beach, was killed in a boating accident, and it seems as if Paul was, at the wheel and had been acting erratically by all accounts of people on the boat. And right away, Alex's dad and Alex ended up at the hospital trying to get kids to, basically walking into hospital rooms. It was nuts. So we, after the murders, learned about this accident, and then, so can we attribute it to that? And then there was another death had been attributed. This, after they had been looking around, they reopened a case of this LGBTQ known young man who was openly out, but South Cackalack, down south, not always cool. He had been killed on a road out there, kind of near the Moselle property, but his death didn't look right, and his mom and sister were always like, it's not right. Stephen Smith. So they reopened his death investigation, and that had been in 2018 or 19. So they're all these okay, wait, how does that tie into the Murdochs? And then I forget which came first. There was so prior to all of this, apparently Alec knew, and it was coming down that they were looking into his finances, and he knew he was doing all these dirty dealings with insurance problem, he was, I don't know how he was both the prosecutor, but he also was part of a private, his family's firm, and they would sue people, and he would basically do what, if you're watching the Housewives show, Erica Jane, her husband, and all the shenanigans he got into by being a personal injury lawyer, but taking, they get the money, they're supposed to distribute it right away to the victims, but instead they kept it. Okay, same, allegedly, that airline case. Same sort of thing that we find out was going on with Alex. So basically, his wife and son are murdered. And everybody's like, wait a minute, what? And then they open up this other murder. Oh, and there had been a death at that Moselle property of his longtime housekeeper, Gloria Satterfield. And they started looking into that. And the money problems and everything exploded. And then, oh my God, it seemed like he said he tried to hurt himself, unalive himself, by hiring this guy who worked for him, but the guy has a different story, and he didn't really have a mark on him, but he was life flighted out of there. So all sorts of craziness, all sorts of crimes of all different types. So just this week, here's the update. Number 1, get ready. This is why it's the Menage a Trois Rod, because number 1, high impact velocity splatter was reported to have been on his shirt, which means or indicates that Alec was at the property and during the crimes. I'm not saying he committed the crimes, but so that's crazy. So they said he had to have been near the victims when they were hurt. Now, at the time, he had said he was with his dying father. But the second big part of this was not just that we have some forensic evidence, but if you can believe this, they found, I'm sure they knew, but we're finding out, there were text messages from, trying to lure Maggie out to the Moselle property. We don't know exactly what he said, but so we thought, at the first you're like, oh, the mom and the son were at the hunting property, the dad was visiting his dying father, and then all this craziness happened, and then he came back after visiting with his dying father in hospice and found this mess, right? Because he made this horrific 911 call. But now, it seems, we didn't know at the time, they were divorcing, there was all these money problems, and she was hesitant and had talked to a number of her friends, should I go out there? Should I go see him? Now, true crime friends, what did we say before? If you've been around with me a few weeks, we talked about this with the Casey Carley case, and there's been a number of them. But do not go meet somebody that you're having personal problems with without other people around you. Do not. Especially if you're having that feeling, should I do this? Don't do it. That's what we can learn from this. Again, we're not victim shaming. It's shaming. There is no way Maggie could have known. But she did have a gut feeling. And now, So she was at their beach house. And she was aware there was a huge money problem. She was seeing divorce attorneys. So before she could get into all that, I guess he thought he'd take care of a problem. Now, I have to. Not only, so he lured, that's a hard word to say if you're dyslexic or anybody. I think the L and the E and the R together are hard. He lured, that makes it easier, Maggie out there. Now we find out Paul went out there because his friend's dog had been injured and was staying at the kennels, and he promised to go look after his friend's dog. So, well, we could say Paul didn't have the best judge of like of best judgment when it came. He seems to have an alcohol problem, allegedly. I don't know, this is speculation, but you know, he went out there. So if you remember the crime scene, and if you don't, let me just tell you, what was interesting was they said there were 2 different types of guns used, and one was from the property. So what if Paul doesn't know that his dad's coming out there, his mom doesn't know Paul's coming out there, and let's say Paul and Maggie are outside discussing whatever, and not Paul and Maggie, sorry, Alec goes to talk to Maggie, and there's whatever, and then Paul, who wasn't supposed to be there, hears this, you know, or sees the problem, and he grabs a gun from the property and tries to defend his mom, and instead and that would somehow make sense of why Alec's 911 call was so emotional, because maybe he never intended to have to take out his kid. Allegedly. My speculation, we don't know. Okay, so the luring, the gun splatter, the forensics. Third issue of this was, again, this is very hard to follow, but there's been more financial misdeeds found out. Something related to people who had lost their funeral home, wanted to buy it back. Alec had lended them the money, and they're like saying, no, we paid him back. But the people who bought it, who got the money from Alec, their son was one of his victims who Alec had represented and was supposed to, give him, he won in court over $600,000, and the son never saw it. We're up to our third case, which is the Ballot Bow Case, and our pairing, okay, it's a mom water, mom water, for those moms who like their water to have a little, I guess it has tequila in it. Let's pop this puppy open. Okay, so it's got some carbonation, and it has 0 carbonation. It says it's lemon and blueberry, which I love. It's called Karen, and I don't know if you've heard about what a Karen is, but Lori would be a Karen. So, even though it's not a Lori, here's to you. So, Lori Vallow, it's probably low carb, so it doesn't taste that sweet. It's probably, that's why it's a mommy water, because it's probably good for you. Okay. The Ballot Bow case, like the Murdaugh case, is very convoluted and involved. It involves multiple big M's and financial crimes along the way, and of course, all because of religion. Gotta throw that in there. Okay, so Chad and Lori are accused of, for their own twisted purposes related to a splitter Mormon religion that Chad developed called the First Church of the Firstborn. Yeah, they have a whole convoluted thing about how people can become zombies and how they have to be the big M, or as we say, unalived, in order to be released. Yeah, and it just helps if you still collect like on Social Security when they're gone, or if they're your wife, you collect on their insurance payment. I mean, their life insurance. So if you haven't kept up with the Lori Vallow case, please go over to see our friends at Hidden True Crime. Hidden True Crime is a podcast started to talk about the Ballot Bow case by a journalist, Lauren Matthias, and her husband is a criminal psychologist, Dr. John Matthias, and she has a co-host to their podcast that she does lives with every Friday, a lawyer. She was a defense lawyer. I believe she also did some work in the prosecution office. Her name is Lori Hellis, and she's worked in both Arizona and I believe Utah or Idaho, where these cases have all taken place. So she's not just aware of the law, but around the area law. And she is moving to Boise because the case has been moved out of Rexburg, Idaho, where the children were found in Chad's backyard. So it's Lori's 2 children, Tylee, who was 16, JJ, who was, I can't believe I forgot, 7 or 8, 9, very young. And he was autistic. And a very sweet child who had, previously to all this craziness with Lori, had actually gotten very good treatment, had a service dog, was on the right meds, was thriving, and was sweet. And over the course of like a year, she was involved in luring her ex to the rental he was paying for before they were divorced, thinking she was going to get his life insurance, but having her brother self-defense unalive him. And then she had given away her son's, then all of a sudden, like, she did these horrible things, gave away his service dog, tried to give it away, and then the service people were like, no, you have to, that was a trained special dog, you have to give it back. And then took him out of his special school, took him off his meds. So what do you think that did to him, right? Wouldn't let him talk to his grandparents, Kate and Larry Woodcock, and then moved immediately up to this Rexburg, Idaho place where all of a sudden then Tylee disappeared shortly after they moved up there in September, early September, then later September, JJ disappeared. And by disappeared, I mean, we're going to find out more. In fact, another good one of my main squeezes to follow is Gigi and Fruit Loop at Pretty Lies and Alibis. They're on YouTube and on Twitter. And Gigi was at CrimeCon this weekend, and said she spoke with Nate Eaton. He said the scuttlebutt, like just things they're hearing, is like, this is going to be, like, the details are far worse than what we expect. I can't even imagine how they could be worse than what we already know. But anyway, so after the children were missing and right before they were found, Lori and Chad ran off to Hawaii. She often, I guess, went, I mean, she's gone to Hawaii off and on a lot. I don't know why Hawaii draws the crazies like that. There was another cult that was there, like a couple of them. I don't know, maybe it's because it's beautiful. That's just so strange to me. Anyway, she was brought back from Hawaii because she wouldn't produce her children, and then she was in jail, extradited to Rexburg, Idaho for that. Sat in jail for a while, was very sassy and sort of smirking all the time whenever we saw her in court. As soon as they found the bodies and she was charged with murder, all of a sudden her lawyer said, oh, she needs to be evaluated for her competency. Speaking of mommy water, I need some to deal with this. Yeah, competent as soon as you're charged with murder. So she had to be assessed and couldn't be arraigned. And she was assessed and was found incompetent, so they don't have guilty by insanity in Idaho. You have to just be restored to competency and then put on trial. And then in the meantime, everything is stayed. So for a whole, almost a year, she's been not competent. So, but as of April, she was found competent. And she did have her arraignment, and she is going to trial, but because she was being restored, Chad her prior illicit boyfriend, who had a wife until she mysteriously died, and he is now charged with her death and insurance fraud. She, when I lost track of what I was saying. I'm so sorry. All right, so Chad's case was going on. He was charged. He did get arraigned for the murder charges, and his case did move forward with John Pryor being his lawyer. And they did, as soon as it'll be over a year now, in August, he did get, they said these are death penalty charges. So now, just recently, like, what day was it? Yesterday? On Monday? May 2nd, they said Lori now also is, and they had to expect that because the cases are still joined, but what happened was, as soon as she said she was competent, because she was sort of behind what was happening, and she was indigent, so her one lawyer was replaced with a death certified attorney, and he brought on another attorney, and they said at the arraignment that she did not waive her speedy trial rights, which is you have to be, your trial has to start within 6 months. So that would put us, like they said at the time, October 19th, which was when Tammy was unalived, which was kind of crazy and sort of like weird. The universe is on schedule type of thing. But I will just tell you, it seemed as if, like, okay, so the cases have to be, they said the cases could not be separated. They were joined. But then Lori's case would be in October. So then the big question is, does Chad's case get moved up to October? Or, because Chad was he's scheduled to be, his trial to start January 9th. So now that it is for sure, they're asking for the death penalty, things are a little more serious, and they also probably have to get a mitigation person. A mitigation person is a lawyer who just works on the punishment phase. They're not dealing with the trial part. They're dealing with, like, so if she does get convicted, how do we get her not to have the death penalty? The state submitted a brief asking the judge to, because the two cases are technically still joined, but Lori's was scheduled for October, and Chad's was scheduled for January. They said, we think that, so the state has to show good cause if a person's right to a speedy trial would take place. And so their arguments are kind of what you would expect, which is October, January, February, or January, October to November, December, like the beginning of January. So that's like 2 months, really. 2.5 months. So they're not asking to reduce her. It's not like that unspeedy. It's just a little bit more. The cases are joined. Now that it's a death penalty case, and it does show good cause for everybody, including Lori, that her lawyers have more time to get ready for this because they haven't been working, and the new guy was just brought on. And then there was some discussion about, because there's the case for each of them, so for Lori and Chad, are supposed to take 10 weeks each. So they're joined. So right now, the whole trial has been moved to Ada County from across the state of Idaho, in Rexburg, which is Fremont County, I believe. And it's 740 miles. Our fifth case today is the Petito civil case against the Laundries. Today, so before we get into it, I have a red sangria. Sangria is sort of tropical and summery, and it reminds me of Florida. And this one says that it is fun and fruity, sparkling, and sparkling and fun reminds me of Gabby Petito. So here's to Gabby and her memory, and for some justice for her family, the Petito and Schmidt family. Oh, it's good. Ooh, I like that. Way better than that nasty mom water with nasty Lori. Left a bad taste in my mouth like Lori Vallow leaves in my mouth. All right, so case 5. Just an update on this lawsuit. So you might remember the whole world was sort of captivated by this beautiful girl named Gabby Petito who had gone missing, and her sort of odd boyfriend who returned home with Gabby's van. They had been going like a long trip out west, from starting in New York, traveling all the way out west. They had done it the year before. It was during COVID. She was interested in the van life. So she was sort of documenting both of these trips. And so this was the second one. And so he returned home September 1st in the van, which was Gabby's van, without Gabby. So, right, like big warning signs should have been going off in everybody's head. That was September 1st. By September 6th, he and his family were on a little vacation to Fort DeSoto where they had, s'mores around a fire and camped out, as one does. And by the 11th, Gabby's mom had been going insane, Ms. Schmidt, Nicole Schmidt, because her baby had not gotten in touch with her, and she got some weird text about there's no cell coverage in Yosemite, but they weren't in Yosemite. The last she knew, they were in Wyoming, and this made no sense, and she couldn't get a hold of her. And so this is the crux of this civil suit, and she couldn't get a hold of Brian's family because they had blocked her number and blocked her on Facebook. So Gabby had been living and was engaged to Brian, and Gabby's father, Joe Petito, lived also in Florida, and the Schmidts lived where everybody had originally come from. Like Brian met Gabby in high school in like Long Island area in New York, but she had gotten to know him, and they were living together I think they had been living together in a condo that Brian's parents paid for, if I'm correct. And then they started doing this van life during COVID, and had put some of their stuff into storage, and Joe, her father, had helped purchase this van so they could do this van life thing, get out into the world. What everybody didn't know was a couple things going on behind the scenes. One, which is rarely talked about but was mentioned a few times by Gabby's friend Rose, was that Brian was hearing voices, and that sometimes Gabby would come stay with her at night and saying that Brian was out of sorts, and the voices wouldn't let him sleep. If you know anything about psychology, as I told you before, I know about typical psychology, but along with typical, when it becomes atypical, I'm not a specialist in that, but I can tell you what isn't typical and signs of atypicalness. And at the end of adolescence and in early young adulthood is the time when schizophrenia is the time when it appears. I am not able to diagnose Brian. Brian is no longer with us. That's a whole other story about there was a big manhunt for him. His family had not been quite truthful about the timeline. They forgot when he left the house. He was found weeks later. He was found with a gunshot, and it appeared that he didn't even get out of his tent. Supposedly he had run away. So somehow from the Laundrie's vacation, while Gabby was lying dead somewhere, they went on vacation. And after that vacation on the 8th, apparently somehow Brian got to this park, and his parents said it was a different park, and they didn't know anything, but he had his camping equipment, but he never unfurled it, and he was unalived by a gun, but it wasn't with the right hand. He's right-handed, and it was on, it would have been left-handed shot. The whole thing has lots of questions left over it, and there was a notebook found in a dry bag. The weirdest thing was that after there'd been like a month search. Somehow the laundries said, oh, we're going to look one more time. They walked right into the park and found the dry bag, and nearby was his body. Do the math. Just speculation on my part, but wow. They should have been playing the lottery, because that is one crazy lucky thing to just out of, like, you know, FBI, Florida, nobody can find the remains, and they just like, oh, here they are. No love lost between myself and the dirty laundries, as some people call them. Allegedly, speculation, we don't know. They could be the nicest people. To Gabby and justice. All right, so the lawsuit was a civil lawsuit. So after all this other stuff was over and Brian was no longer found, and the FBI said it looks like he was the only suspect in Gabby's demise out in Wyoming, because there was DV involved. It's pretty clear who did what, right? So the Petito and Schmitz had filed in March a lawsuit, but it wasn't written probably just exactly how it had to be stated. So they were allowed to amend it. They amended it. JB at WFLA, hey, shout out JB, wrote an article that I read, and it said that the lawsuit was amended in 6 specific ways. So, as I said, so they specifically state that the laundries knew that Gabby was dead and Brian was the one who did it, and they knew where she was. And this was all why the police were searching in that timeline. They cite that the laundry statement on September 14th, and Gabby wasn't found until the 19th. They stated that the laundry's actions were beyond outrageous, and when they said, so the laundry said, they had a statement on the 14th that said, it is our hope that Gabby will be found and reunited with her parents. Like, no, you know that she's not going to be found well. Like, they said specifically, would they say that she would be found, that the search will be successful and that she will be reunited with her family, when they knew that she was already been unalived. Law enforcement, they had said that the family hadn't spoke with like the Petitos or anybody, and they included law enforcement. That was taken out because apparently they did speak with law enforcement, maybe, although they didn't tell them what they needed to. But the fact that they went radio silence with the family and blocked them on a number of things. In Section 31, they specified that the laundries, and this is what I think is important, that the laundries were aware of the pain and suffering, and they knew they could prevent additional mental suffering and anguish by telling Gabby's status, like saying they knew that she wasn't alive any longer, and the location, so that they didn't otherwise, and put that together with this thing of their hope for a happy ending and a reunion. So basically, they were purposefully and wantonly, without any regard for the Petito-Schmidt family, providing false information to the public and everybody listening, making it sound as if they knew nothing. They could have prevented this. The 5th change was, okay, so the 5th change has 5 different parts to it. The allegation of failing to inform Gabby's family that she was deceased, the failing to inform her parents of the location, taking, I don't know how, this is like part of the wanton disregard, taking a family vacation knowing that everybody, including her parents, were looking for her. I mean, it's the parents' mental anguish and suffering that they are claiming that the laundries did. So it's based on them. So basically not letting them, like, going off and having fun and not even knowing, like, and not saying anything to her parents when they did know. Then blocking access to their phones and Facebook, and then issuing that statement of hope. So, and then the 6th modification or amendment to the civil lawsuit was the separation of counts between Chris and Roberta. So now, like, each count of causing mental anguish and what is it? The phrase is, hold on. The legal phrase in Florida is, it's damages for pain and suffering, emotional distress, leading to the neglect or recklessness in some way, the actions that lead to emotional distress. And so, count 1 and 2 is Joseph Petito against the Laundries. One is like against Christopher Laundrie, the father, and the second one is against Roberta Laundrie. And then counts 3 and 4 are Nicole Schmidt versus Christopher Laundrie, the father, and Roberta Laundrie, the mother. And in Florida, so there is the civil law does include like a thing about pain and causing pain and suffering, and you have to show that the person neglected or was reckless in some way, and that their actions led to your emotional distress. So this was more targeted, more specific about who and what, and if it goes, it will be August 14th. There's a date on the calendar. So if the judge accepts this amended civil lawsuit complaint. And so if you listen to Emily Baker, she'll tell you the complaint in a civil lawsuit, it's all, what does she call it? Allegations and shade. I mean, it is only what the people suing think. It's not supposed to be facts. It is definitely allegations and shade. But previously, the complaint had just said basically they were horrible to, like, outrageous of our feelings and blah blah. It wasn't as specific. There wasn't specificity. We are on our 6th. It's not just one case. This is like the quick bits catch up. It's not enough to make really a case. It is May 3rd, Tuesday, because I always see you next Tuesday. This is a quick update on the Cody Bigsby and a little quick bit on the Barry Morphew case. We're pairing this with, okay, so I don't know if you can see this, but it really says yes way Rose, but I put no way Rose, because no way. Why do I say that? Well, I'll tell you. They need to have a no way. Wait, I didn't figure it out. Anyways. I was doing something with Merlot, but I didn't figure it out. Anyway, no way Rose is what we're going to call this, even though if you like it, it's yes way Rose. Let's see how it pairs. Ew. It's kind of icky, which goes with these two cases. All right, so here we have two men who don't seem to really get what's going on in their lives, and they are overstepping my speculation, my opinion. So Cody Bigsby was a 4-year-old boy who was reported missing this past January 31st by his father, but authorities can't really find any proof of life. They think what they can find is more in November. So November, like around Thanksgiving. The thing is, 4-year-olds don't always go to school. They don't have to go to school. So especially during the pandemic, it was easier for people not to notice when small little people were missing. And we've had a couple of those cases, unfortunately. And this seems to be one of them. We are not aware, or at least I am not aware, of where Cody's mom is. So his dad was in charge. His dad was in jail because, and he's still, I believe, is in jail because he admitted to not watching his children, like leaving them all alone, which is child endangerment charges. And the fact that one of them, a 4-year-old, is missing is pretty serious. So his dad is Corey, which if you're dyslexic, Corey and Cody is horrible because it's too close. So he got a new lawyer. I believe he was appointed a lawyer before, And that lawyer was able to get off the case, and he got a new lawyer. And since he's received a new lawyer, well, now he is suing. He is suing the city and the prosecuting office of the city, the DA, he wants them to, oh gosh, it's unbelievable. So he wants to, he's filing a civil suit to cease and desist. He's asking the Hampton, Virginia, Police Department to retract statements made about the case, to cease and desist from making public comments that could obstruct justice or tamper with the future jury pool, which that lawyer should know. What she needs to do is do what they do in other cases, like the West Boys case, which is the judge in charge of the case. You file with the judge to put a gag order on everybody. You don't just cease and desist. So I don't know where this girl went to law school. This woman went to law school. She wants to ask the community not to harass or threaten the Bigsby family, and to issue a public apology to the Bigsby family for making statements that put them at risk. Okay, look, a 4-year-old disappears. You admit you don't watch your kids. The community is upset with you. That's kind of cause and effect. And what is this lawyer's name? The new lawyer? Mathena Willard. Ms. Mathena Willard. Girl. I don't know if you've heard this, but you can't legalize moral behavior. Okay? You can't tell the police department and the city hall to make people be nice to your client. It is cause and effect. There's a 4-year-old missing. He was in charge, and the child is gone. And likely at this point, if we haven't seen him since, it's been almost, November, December, January, February, March, April, May, 6 months. That is a problem, and you can't legalize morality. Sorry, you can't. People are going to be upset. If people are somehow breaking the law through harassment or vandalization or something legally, then, what do? You file that. You call the police. You don't send to the police department and the city council, make everybody be nice. That's not a thing. So, Mr. Bigsby's previous lawyer left. He asked to be removed from the case. We don't know why. He just withdrew. I don't know. Maybe Miss Mathena Willard is doing what her client asks her to do and is just filing it because, okay. But here's the thing. Look, you sent a letter to the police department and then you leak it to the press, but then the press says, okay, can we interview you? And you say, no interviews. What? That makes no sense. Okay, so Cody Bigsby was 4 years old. He is still missing. He is a 4-year-old, beautiful African-American child with big brown eyes, so cute. They didn't even have really an updated picture of him. It sounds like his home life was less than optimal, that his parenting skills of his dad were less than optimal. I don't know. But trying to file this, what do we say? No way, Rose. All right, that's why this pairs well. Although, it's kind of stinky. Sorry, whoever makes No Way Rosé. I'm not a fan of rosés. It's stinky and a little bitter. Kind of like, Barrymore Few case. Okay, so this has nothing actually to do with Barrymore Few. This little bits and pieces update has to do with the judge. Judge Lama, who was in charge of the case, is retiring. And he's had enough. So, and there's rumblings that there will be another that they'll refile the lawsuit. This is our last case. Here's Johnny. That's right, it's a celebrity case. And what do we have for celebrity cases? We have Barefoot Bubbly. Why? Because it's like some champagne. And we will toast. Woo! To justice and to Johnny. To justice for Johnny. So, as I have told our friends here before on the True Crime Grapevine, look, this is the grapevine. I'm squeezing some juicy rumors. I'm following, for the Johnny case, Mel and a couple of the behavior panel and the behavior language guy, Jesus. Hey, Jesus. And I am following a little bit Heather McDonald, and of course the esteemed, the ever effervescent, the Here's to You lawyer crew, all the law nerds, over at the Emily Show, Emily D. Baker. Seriously, if you want to know anything about the law, especially like that defamation case, I'm interested if she's going to cover she's covered a little bit of the Petito case, and Emily D. Baker, she is the person you want about the Johnny Depp case, and really all the pop culture, especially like the housewife cases and anything having to do with celebrities. So, we've got our champagne. I'm not going to talk that in depth about Depp, but from what I've seen, number one, let's just remember that men can be just as much a victim of DV as women. And so in the case this week so far, I'm getting confused because, let's see, there was a psychologist that took the stand, and I'm going to not remember her name because of dyslexia, but because so this is what happened, because Amber Heard had said she had PTSD from dealing with Johnny. That opened the door for them to go, okay, well, hey, you have to be checked then by a psychologist, right? Because we want to make sure it's accurate. So this woman was to pick an expert. You meet with them. So she met with his legal team, and Johnny was there, and then they included a dinner. And so of everything she said, she was like, talked about that Amber Heard displayed attributes of borderline personality and histrionic personality. Histrionic personality is kind of an older term for things that now we would call, like Dr. Grande, who I also love, who's you should watch his videos on YouTube, Dr. Grande. He calls it vulnerable narcissism. That it displays aspects of personality where they are unable to separate. They have they're insecure all the time. And that went just along with everything that had been described by both Johnny and previously other witnesses about her. Their fighting technique was she would follow him and he would try to be like, look, I need a space. We need a timeout. And she would be like, no, you need to keep, she was enmeshed is another word. I'm not sure the psychologists use that, but in psychology, we talk about enmeshment, where you can't separate yourself from the other. So she, even in a highly volatile situation, it's like she only could get or keep his attention through dramatic, very highly intensified feelings. This is my interpretation. This is my speculation. And we've all seen relationships like that, where they fight and make up, and it always seems to be full of drama. This is what that seems like. But it seems a little bit more, in my estimation, just from watching some of the broadcast about it, a little more calculated on her part. And his background with his family seems to have engendered a sort of tolerance for women who are overbearing or which is kind of how he described his mother to be towards his father. And we know in psychology that the modeling that we see does get set, and we do tend to, whether it is good or bad, we tend to follow this, be attracted to the same and create the same models of family that we grew up with. So that's kind of interesting. So, I mean, you can break cycles of things like that, but it is very hard and it takes a lot of therapy. And it sounds like Johnny Depp very much willing to, I mean, even though he was addicted to drugs and she was with him when he tried to get over them. And even, it sounds as if he was constantly trying to appease her, and when he couldn't, he would want to get away from her and isolate, and she would follow along and not let him. And that would eventually lead to a big, somebody is whistling. Isn't that lovely? Anyways, I'm just going to finish this up. So, the biggest thing about Johnny Depp and his finger getting hurt, that whole story that he told and that was explained, and that when when Rottenborn, her attorney, was questioning Johnny Depp, it was very interesting about the fact that he described her throwing a bottle that eventually hurt his hand, and then when he went to the hospital, he didn't tell on her. Which reminds you of people who like, oh, I walked into a door. Like, they don't tell the whole story. So if we're going to assign victimhood, I definitely would not assign it to her. There was the other story about the Amica cream. Apparently, Amica cream, the makers of it, the brand that they held up, there's like a concealer cream packet, compact, and she said, I use this every day, and like basically to hide bruises. And people were like, you didn't have bruises. And the manufacturer tweeted back and were like, that wasn't made until 2017, and she had already filed for divorce. The other kind of juicy little tidbit was she was seeing other people, and there is, it was on, sorry, that's my kid. So on the YouTubes, who was it? It was Planet Popcorn. Andy Signor, I believe his name is, had on a person who lived in the same apartment complex that this all took place in, and she described a very different scenario, and she was talking about the cameras and how you could see where Amber Heard let in James Franco on the mezzanine level, and she said you had to let in somebody from the parking area in that level, and it's exactly as long as it takes, and that's why she came down to get him. Her story did not jive with that. She was like, he just visited, and she's like, no, you would have to, he didn't just pop in, you would have to purposely go down, and that's exactly what that showed. So his Johnny Depp story of her cheating